So what if I told you guys you can get a smartphone with a Snapdragon A10 processor, 3 gigs of RAM, up to 2 terabytes in micro SD card storage, and a nice rich in color 5.5-inch 1080p POLED display, all for under $300. Now, you may think I'm crazy, but it is very possible, and the name of this phone is the LG G Flex 2. Hi guys, this is Nick, and welcome to my first ever YouTube video, and welcome to my first ever YouTube channel. This is NHTV, and let's check out why I love this phone so much and why I'm recommending it to you today. Alright guys, so first things first, let's touch upon the design of this phone. As you can tell, as you're seeing right here, it's a very shiny, very plasticky phone, and that's because it is an all plastic design phone, which kind of what helps it get that flex, as you can see here and see here, for this phone, and as the name suggests, LG G Flex 2. You get that curved design, that curved display, the curved backing, everything inside the phone practically is curved except for maybe the processor and a couple other things, but the battery is curved inside there as well. And it's just very, very nice feel in the hand. It's very lightweight. It doesn't feel like it's too heavy like most 5.5-inch phones. And the ergonomics of this phones are very good. You can reach all sides of the display with your thumb up and down. Because of that curve, it kind of gives you that little bit of leverage to reach the top. And in the back, you've got your volume up and volume down key. You've got your power button. You got your 13 megapixel camera with laser autofocus and dual LED flash. You've got a micro USB port on the bottom and a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack on the bottom there. You've got your IR blaster with your microphone, and on the sides you've got nothing, which really helps with the ergonomics of this phone and just in-hand feel. And for the most part, I love how it feels in the hand, but the only problem I'm seeing right here, as you guys can see yourselves, is the fingerprints. You really cannot get away from fingerprints on this phone. And although that kind of goes into what LG is calling this as a very tough resistant backing, where you can see that a majority of the times, most phones, when they're put in your pocket and they're next to keys, gets lots of scratches. This phone does not, because of the technology that they use in this back cover, which is good and bad. Sometimes you get some scratches, sometimes you don't. So for the most part, I haven't been able to get a scratch on the back of this phone, but I've been very delicate with it. And for the most part, it feels really nice in the hand. So without further ado, let's jump onto the display. Now moving on to the display, we've got a 1920 by 1080p display, and it's a POLED display. That means that it's a plastic display, and that's how they help get the curve for this phone, because it is a curved display. And for the most part, you get a lot of the benefits of having an OLED display. As you can tell there, it looks like the screen is off when in fact I've zoomed into the black part, and that is because of the technology that's being used in it. The pixels actually only light up for white colors or colors just not black. So it looks like it's actually turned off, which gives it that deep black look. But for the most part, you get the nice saturation, get some nice colors here. And since it is 1080p, you get some good detail. In daylight, you get some good viewing in the sun. It's not terrible, it's not the best, but you're able to see what you have to see because the screen actually gets very bright. It has a very bright output, and for the most part, it's standard in bright mode. So it doesn't get very dim, but it does get very bright. But in all honesty, oh, I'm looking a little Mustang right there that I was able to customize on Ford.com. This screen is very nice. It gets the job done, and that curve does give it a nice appeal to it because of the fact that it looks like it's being immersed. You're being immersed in the content that you're watching, a lot like the curved display. So there's a lot of appeal to here, but it's not a flagship style because it's not 2K display, but the 1080p does get the job done for the most part, and I'd say that this is one of the better 1080p displays that are out there on the market. So before I run into some samples of the video, I wanted to show you guys some of the camera interface. It's actually very simple. LG has gone with a much simpler kind of intuitive face that they had before. Before they had all these modes and all these colors going around. Now they just kind of have a settings wheel where you can adjust things like your megapixel count, your HDR auto, voice command, grid, and things like where you're going to save into the SD card. In the mode, they've got panorama, normal auto mode, panorama, dual, where it shows the front facing 5 megapixel camera and the 13 megapixel camera as well. Let me get out of there, go back into mode. And basically, it's very simple. It's not that complicated to get used to, and not very many features, but for the most part, this camera does a very good job in taking pictures. And you'll notice that as I go in and out and zooming and going in, looking for focus levels. The camera does focus very fast, and that's because of that laser autofocus that I mentioned before, which helps with the stabilization and helps with taking quick shots and getting a quick stabilization. As you can tell right there, in between shots, taking a little bit longer than I normally expected out of the camera. I think it's because I changed it to the 13 megapixel output, but it is very quick, and when you change in and out, you get some quick response time. Moving into the camera samples, you see some good pictures here when you have good lighting. In good lighting, the laser autofocus is fast, and the pictures are clear, there's a lot of detail. The 13 megapixel camera is able to capture everything you need to get, and shots are very crisp and vivid, and that really attributes to the fact that they're using the LG G3's camera that they used from last year, which was very sharp. In low light, it's not as good. There is some grain to the photos, especially indoors and outdoors, but for the most part, if you get into a good lighting condition in low light, you can capture some of that detail back again. It definitely helps if you're able to use flash at night. I'll have a photo that's coming up right now that's going to show you some of that detail that you're able to capture there. But for the most part, the camera's good. Really no complaints here, especially in broad daylight, but at night it could be better. Moving to the video sample, you see that the OIS is helping slightly with the image stabilization of this shot, and for the most part, video is very good on this camera. It is a little shaky. It's not like an iPhone 6 or 6 Plus that you would expect nice smooth transitions, but for the most part, visuals are good on this camera, and there's really no complaints here in that department. I mean, it's not the greatest and it's not the worst, but it definitely does have its high points, especially here in 4K video that you can capture on here. It's actually scaled down to 1080p, but for the most part, in good sunlighting, you get some good video, some good detail, and for the most part, it's a great camera. I really don't have complaints about this camera except for some low light shots, but for the most part, it does its job. So the next thing I want to talk about is actual performance of the phone. So since this phone runs a Snapdragon 810 processor and 3 gigs of RAM, it is very fast and fluid. And for the most part, it is partly due to the fact that it is octa-core, and it does have many cores to be able to process anything that this phone throws at it. And for the most part, it jumps in and out of apps. I haven't really had a problem trying to go in, playing apps, playing games, day-to-day usage. It does overheat. After a while, it does get that overheating normalness that you'll get when opening many apps or running highly intensive games. But for the most part, day-to-day usage has been pretty good. I don't get very many lag or stutter, which is normally the norm for LG-based phones, but this phone has been the exception, and it's been very, very good thus far. It hasn't really gone below or beyond my expectations, but it's been very solid every day. And going in and out of apps has been very, very good. Multitasking is very, very good. And the 3 gigs of RAM is able to keep a lot of the stuff in memory that you normally are trying to keep in memory. So it's very nice, very fluid experience, and there's really no complaints on this end. I know there's been a lot of reports about it, but for the most part, my experience with this phone has been very fast and very fluid. Alright guys, just to run you through a little more of what the performance is, I'm going to run through a speed test right now. I'm going to open up the clock. Let's start it up. First thing I'm going to open is Instagram, kind of scroll through there, see how it opens. Opens pretty quick. Scrolling's very quick. Then open up the camera. Camera opens really good, really fast. Everything's quick, you know, snapping a photo, opening it up, opening up the browser, trying to load in a page. I'm going to see trying to load at a page here, right here. Type into swappa.com and look at the BlackBerry passports. I looked at those in the past, so that was one of my recent URLs there. Open up NFL Mobile, which is one of the more slower apps that I have. Look at my team, pretty funny team name there. And then MLB at Bat, which is very, very slow app for me normally. And right now it opened up very fast, very fluid. And then I'm going to go into multitasking and kind of just go back into each one to show you how the gig of RAM works for this phone. And it keeps everything in memory. With 3 gigs of RAM, it keeps everything in memory. There's really no stutter, no lag or anything like that. So when you stop the timer, 55 seconds and 55.33 seconds, and that's pretty fast for a phone with LG software that's really, really, as you could say, bloated, and it's moved quick, and that's really attributed to the Snapdragon 810 processor and that 3 gigs of RAM. Alright guys, so I've jumped into the settings here because I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the software of this phone. I'm going to go into settings, look into software info, and actually show you that I am running 5.1.1 Android, and if I click and tap that a bunch of times, I'll get prompted to this lollipop screen. You click and hold and you get into that kind of little pappy jump game. which I fail at miserably every single time. But when I get out of here, I'll show you guys some of the things that kind of LG works on here. First things first, you see this notification tray has a lot of baked in stuff into it, which you've got on the top here. You've got some things like being able to toggle your Wi-Fi, priority only, Q slide apps, battery saver, lots of things up there. Some things that are normal to Android and some things that are actually added in, like quick memo from LG, which basically takes a screenshot of what you're looking at. You can write some notes, you can change the text if you want to write some text there, and went out of quick memo. If you want to write some text in there, and basically if you want to save it, you can save it into your gallery and it's there for you forever if you want to take a note and just kind of keep something in there. Looking still at that notification tray, you got your Q slide apps, which actually Q slide is able to put another app running in the background over what your screen is. So you can put your calculator, if you want to pull your calculator really quick and you're looking at a calculation on the screen, you can take down the transparency, write it down, and then calculate it on the actual app instead of having to open it up and go back and forth. Another thing I want to show you guys is in the multi-window key right here, this dual window function. So basically you can put two different apps at one time running on the same screen, and you're basically multitasking. So if I'm looking at my maps, or if I'm looking at if I want to watch YouTube while I'm keeping the navigation going, I can do that. And basically it works very flawlessly. It's very fast, and I haven't had any complaints with it. Most of the time it's only Google apps, so it's limited to that. You can't run every single app on there, but it's very useful when you do want to do some multitasking, and it stays in your multitasking window if you want, and it actually adds in some new features if you want there. So if I want to put calculator in there, it won't have that, but the Google apps will have that, like YouTube or like Hangouts. If I go back into Maps, it'll kind of save that in there for the most part, but once you exit it, it won't keep it there. But for the most part, there isn't too many different LG stuff baked into it. Maybe some things in the setting that I can show you guys, like the smart gestures or the calibrations to the screen. But for the most part, it's a pretty clean and concise experience, and you don't really get too much out of it. LG's done a good job of being able to simplify their software so that people aren't getting too much of that bloat in there that they normally used to get. There's some gestures there that you can get out to silence incoming phone calls, or if you want to answer a phone call, there's this quick circle case that if you want to keep on there, I actually don't have it, so I'll toggle it off. The dual window feature, here's the display to calibrate it, change the way your phone turns off. So there's some customization features there, but it's not too much and not too into the way like it used to be. And for the most part, it's a very enjoyable experience, and LG's getting better and better, just like Samsung, at reducing some of those Samsung apps and those LG apps that are bloating up the screen. So for the most part, it's been a pretty good experience. It's not like stock Android, but it could be worse. And for the most part, it still keeps that fluidity, which is what's crucial to these types of phones. All right, guys, so next thing I want to talk to you guys about is battery life. Battery life on this phone has been, to say the least, atrocious. It's one of the phones on this market right now that just has terrible battery life. I mean, it barely lasts about 3 hours of on-screen time every day on day-to-day usage, and I always have to be plugging it in around this time, which is about 5 o'clock. If I can kind of get my camera to go up there and show you, around 5 o'clock is normally where I'm getting this. 2 hours and 54 minutes of on-screen time. I had about an hour of talk time on the phone today too. So in mixed usage, you're getting about 4 hours total between talk time and screen on time. And for 2015, and for the fact that this phone has a 3000 milliamp hour battery, it is not very good at all. I have to charge it at least once a day, sometimes twice, depending on how hard I use it and how much I use it for. And sometimes when I'm using the camera, trying to take video or trying to take shots, it just drains the battery. So for the most part, this has been a very unpleasant experience in terms of battery life. Hopefully a software update will be able to fix that. When I first got the phone, it was actually running 5.0 and it had worse battery life than this. Then I got a 5.1 update, and then AT&T sent me another update which went back to this bad battery life, and every day I've just been dreading that. That's one of the biggest turnoffs to this phone is battery life. But the good thing is this phone does come with quick charging, so it does charge within about 60 to 75 minutes all the way up to full. So you're getting at least a quick charge out of this. If it did not have quick charging, I'd say that this would be a lot worse, but the fact that it does makes it a little better. But for the most part, this phone is not on par with most flagships today in terms of battery life, especially with this big battery that's inside of here. It's kind of a disappointment. Alright guys, so next thing I want to show you was the speaker quality. It is a rear mounted speaker on the back of this phone. If you look right here on the bottom left hand corner of the phone, the speaker is not that great. It gets plenty loud, but the actual clarity of it is not very good. It's not very bassy. It doesn't have good mids or lows, but for the most part, it does get loud. And compared to some of the other speakers on the market, it's not that good because of the rear-mounted speaker. But if it was on the front, it may be a little bit better. But I'm gonna play you a track by Nero just to show you what the speaker quality is, and you guys can judge for yourselves. Alright guys, so now in conclusion, since I've touched upon pretty much everything, I want to show you guys where I got this phone. I bought this phone on Swappa.com for $300 in a like new condition, and for the most part it's been a very good bang for your buck. I can only say that the other phone that may be able to compete with this phone in this price range to buy new would be the Asus Zenfone 2, and basically that's the only other phone that can really match it. The Alcatel One Touch Idol 3 for $250 doesn't have this stronger octa-core processor. It does have the 1080p display and the front-firing speakers, but it doesn't have this performance and the 3 gigs of RAM that this phone provides. And the Moto G just doesn't have pound for pound the same specs that this phone has as well. I bought this phone as a little bit of an experiment. I had the LG G Flex first when I first got it, and I didn't like it. It was very big. It had a 720p display, and it just wasn't very nice. But this phone, this next generation phone for LG, has been a really good phone. And I know it's taken a lot of criticism, but if you're looking for a new Android phone and you don't want to break the bank, I suggest you go to swappa.com. I'll leave a link down below to kind of show you where I got it, and you can purchase one for yourself if you're willing to go that route. If not, then there's some other competitors out there that you may be able to check. But for the most part, I say that this phone is the best $300 phone if you can find it on the market today. So that wraps it up. This is my first YouTube video ever, so if you liked it, please hit that like button down below and make sure to subscribe to my channel. I'm going to try and get some new phones in the future, try to do some more reviews on some tech, a little more personal, maybe do an About Me section on this YouTube channel just to give you a taste of who I am and what I intend to do with this channel in the future. But for the most part, thank you very much and have a great day, guys.